In the Western Territories, there are roads that sometimes take people exactly where they never meant to go. Most travelers don't get to choose, because sometimes the only road left is the wrong one. On that autumn day, an old stagecoach was moving westward along the trail. Inside the coach were several passengers, along with the mail that had to be delivered to the next towns. The guard sat on top of the coach, watching the road with a rifle resting across his knees. Normally, the route was considered safe. The driver had traveled it for years, but when they reached the narrow stretch between the mountains, they were met with an unexpected sight. Heavy rain during the night had loosened the earth. Rocks had broken free from the cliffs. A massive landslide now blocked the road completely. Stone and mud filled the entire passage. The horses couldn't get through. The driver brought the coach to a stop and studied the blockage for a long time. There was another path nearby, but it was an old trail, one that barely appeared on maps anymore. Local drivers knew it by a name, the Forgotten Pass. For years, stories about that pass had circulated through nearby towns. Some stagecoaches had taken that road and were never seen again. Some travelers claimed strange fires could be seen burning on the cliffs at night. Others said they had heard screams echoing through the rocks, sounds that almost resembled human voices, but not quite. The passengers inside the coach laughed when they heard the stories. The West was full of tales like that. No one wanted to turn back because of a few ghost stories. Eventually, the driver turned the reins. The coach rolled toward the Forgotten Pass. At first, everything looked normal, a narrow trail twisted between tall rock walls. But after a while, something about the silence began to change. There were no birds. Even the wind barely made a sound. It felt as if the entire valley was holding its breath. The horses grew uneasy. At one point, they stopped completely and refused to move forward. The driver cracked his whip. The coach rolled on. As the sun slowly sank behind the cliffs, strange things began appearing along the trail. First, the dark remains of an old campfire. Then a broken rifle lying in the dirt. A little farther ahead, they saw an old boot half buried in the ground. Inside the boot, there was a bone. The deeper they traveled, the narrower the pass became. The rocks rose like walls on both sides. Then the driver noticed something. Small stones were falling from above. Something was moving among the cliffs. At first, they looked like shadows. Then several figures became clearer along the ridge. Human shapes. But they did not look like ordinary men. Their bodies were thin and gaunt. Their clothes hung in torn rags. Hair and beards had grown wild and tangled. Their faces were smeared with dirt and ash. They were men who had once fled the law long ago. Outlaws who had hidden in the mountains for years. But time had changed them. The game in the hills had grown scarce. Travelers were rare, but easy prey. So they built watching points along the cliffs. Small markers made from bones were placed among the rocks. Each one signaled when a new wagon entered the pass. And that day, a new stagecoach had arrived. The shadows began descending from the cliffs. None of them shouted. None of them spoke. They simply moved closer, silently. That silence was the most terrifying part, because these men no longer behaved like bandits. They moved like hunters, like starving creatures closing in on prey. The horses suddenly panicked. The coach lurched forward, but the pass was too narrow. More shadows dropped down from the cliffs. Some blocked the road ahead. Others moved behind the coach. Inside the canyon, The only sound was the horses breathing. That was the moment the guard understood the truth. This wasn't a robbery. This was a hunt. From his seat atop the coach, the guard lifted his rifle. The passengers inside looked out in terror. The shadows kept moving closer. None of them spoke. None of them made a sound. When the moonlight finally revealed one of their faces, the guard saw them clearly for the first time. The man's face was smeared with mud and soot. His eyes were deep, hollow pits, and the expression on his face was no longer human. The guard didn't wait. He pulled the trigger. The rifle cracked like thunder through the narrow pass. One shadow tumbled down the rocks, but the others didn't retreat. Instead, they all moved at once. They rushed down from the cliffs, silent, fast, like creatures that had been starving for far too long. The horses panicked. The coach shook violently. The guard fired again, but it was already too late. The first cannibal had reached the wagon. One of them leapt for the reins. Another climbed the side of the coach and grabbed the guard's leg. The guard tried to swing the rifle, but another figure came from behind. He was dragged from the roof of the coach. There was a brief struggle among the rocks. Then everything went quiet. The cannibals still said nothing, not a single word. Only their breathing could be heard, heavy, hungry, impatient. After a while, thick old ropes were brought out. The passengers were pulled from the coach one by one. Their hands were tied behind their backs. The knots were pulled tight around their wrists. Then the cannibals brought long wooden poles. The prisoners' arms and legs were bound to them. Two men lifted each pole onto their shoulders, like hunters carrying a fresh kill. Some of the passengers tried to struggle, but the ropes were too tight. The guard, half conscious, was tied to another pole. Two cannibals carried him as they walked deeper into the dark pass. His head hung low. After a while, his eyes slowly opened. His face was turned toward the ground. As they carried him through the rocks, he managed to look back one last time. And there he saw the stagecoach, still standing in the middle of the pass. The horses were gone. The door hung open. Inside the wagon, scattered letters moved softly in the wind. The canyon had fallen completely silent. The cannibals continued walking into the darkness, and a few minutes later, the stagecoach was left alone in the valley.